ended up. I love it. Probably.
Yep, whenever you're ready.
Your house parent.
It's a that's smart.
Yeah, okay. House parent, my captain. We'll talk about it sometime.
All right, we will call this meeting of the planning commission to order, the November 11th meeting to order.
It actually,
We
Okay.
started.
Sorry.
Started,
Just
recording started.
Okay, and then real quick, the roll call, everyone is here, a few members are joining us on Zoom as well. First item that requires approval is the approval of the meeting minutes from the October 14th meeting. Does anyone want to make any motion to approve those minutes? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, and then before we turn it over to Nate to kind of get things started, there are 3 items on the agenda. Item 4.2, the Woodmere estates that has been tabled. So the only 2 items that we have are NP land holdings and then the review with Upper Montgomery Township. So the first applicant then being the NP land holdings. If you'd like to come up, introduce yourselves, and then Nate, if you want to bring us up to speed on this.
yeah, sure. Happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay before I get into it? Are the speakers working okay?
Yes.
All right, good deal. All right, so essentially, NP Land Holdings has made another submission to the township. This is following staff level meetings that have been had with the applicants and their design team over the past several months regarding items from previous review letters. We have the most recent review letters as part of the agenda packet for everybody's consideration this evening. And just rolling through things shortly. Again, for those who are new to this project, this is a roughly 55,000 square foot shell building in the Orlick zone. It could be like manufacturing. There are several several loading docks for trailers, presumably for shipping, receiving, whatever the intended final use is to be. This is part of the Industrial Parkway subdivision development. This is actually a lot that has been in place for a number of years, where we've received a number of different proposals that never really moved forward. And this is actually one of the first ones that has gained traction. It's a as of right use in the Orlick zone. And I should note that there are 3 basins that are on the lot currently that manage the existing subdivision. So this lot is responsible for stormwater management for the overall Industrial Parkway development. Not much as far as the actual design or use or anything has changed with the project. In the last iteration, we did review the architecture. We did find it to be both the township zoning officer and myself to be in compliance with our design guidelines. There were a number of items that came up at staff level review as well as engineering level review with the most recent submission, and we have had discussions with the applicant with respect to those. But long story short, we do have a number of items that the Planning Commission may wish to consider this evening, just based off of reviews that have been received, not just by township staff, but also by the LVPC. Again, we bring up the consideration for a crosswalk across Shannick Road. There are ADA ramps that are right there, and we do have the walking paths that are there. From a life safety standpoint, we would recommend no parking painted along the edge of the curb, as well as signage on the entrance to the structure over at the west side. That is basically right in line with where the emergency services template would be for our largest ladder truck. We are looking forward to working with the applicant to do some landscaping modifications, specifically, again, from some of the larger trees to make sure that there's life safety service ease at the site in case they ever need to utilize the ladder truck right next to the building. And as we also always note, certain species of tree we found do have invasive and strong root systems that cause heaving and asphalt and sidewalks and such. And then in addition to that, we are looking forward to having some discussions about continuing working forward to naturalize all the basins on the site in line with our township zoning ordinance and current design standards. And then last but not least, just some housekeeping items, just in terms of making sure that we receive receipts for the street sweeping, for the NPDS permit, which our understanding is to be part of the overall water planning for the site. And then also as far as the storage goes for parking, as noted previously, we have done a count, but when the time comes and the actual user comes in, we'll want to make sure that that's all where everything needs to be as well. So I don't want to get too much into it. Beyond that, the applicants have prepared some presentations and statements. Before we get into that, I would like to invite the township engineer to offer any comments that they have. I know that they've been working closely with the applicant's design team in terms of stormwater management and on-site planning. So I would like to hand it off to the township engineer as we usually do, and then invite our applicants to give us their update and share any new information that they might have.
Thanks, Nate. Yeah, we had met with the applicant's engineer, I guess about a month ago, to discuss our previous review and what we felt was needed to be done in terms of how the stormwater basin design was going to be accomplished. I will say that there were a lot of various analyses that were provided with this submission. But in general, we are going to need to sit down with the applicant's engineer and their team, basically to get clarification on much of the design. We were not quite sure about how some of the things were presented. And I guess one of the biggest question marks for us was that in response to the previous review, the engineer did provide us a copy of a memorandum of understanding from circa 1996, as well as current LVPC statement regarding stormwater management not having to meet the Act 167 requirements. But I guess I think it'd be worth understanding whether the MOU conditions are trying to be applied to the entire project or just the stormwater management. And where it's a bit confusing is that the Act 167 requirements primarily, apart from, relating to volume control and water quality and whatnot, Act 167 requirements specifically talk about release rate ratios that are required for various storms. And if I'm following the design and the presentation correctly, of the three basins that are on the site now, one is going to be modified, and all of the impervious surface created by this proposal will be directed to that basin. The basin is going to be modified in that it will be enlarged. And again, if we're following the report correctly, all of the stormwater will be held, and the discharge will be via an irrigation system, spray irrigation system on the western corner, I'll call it, that little part sticking out of the parcel. And if that's the case, then there is no release of, like, straight up release into the stormwater system in Industrial Parkway and Chanic Road. So it just seems kind of odd to say that previous document applies when in reality the release rates are effectively zero. So I think the reason that's confusing to me is if an applicant was having trouble meeting the current requirements, then that kind of document may come into play. But in this case, I don't think there's any proposed discharge. So it would almost seem like that statement about the Act 167 requirements not having to be met, it becomes almost a moot point. So I'm a little confused on that. The other noteworthy component is that one of the waivers being requested is for the dewatering time. Township requires water in a basin to be there for no more than 12 hours. DEP's maximum time permitted is 72 hours. And based on what I believe the report says, the water will be there for 6 days. So we cannot support that waiver. And that kind of goes back to my statement about we really feel like we need to sit down with the engineer and go over all of this because there's a lot of information. As you all know, I don't like to get into technical discussions during public meetings, but I'm comfortable that things can be addressed. I just don't know that as presented, I'm in a position where I feel comfortable that I can follow along and say, yep, we're good. Another, I guess, positive bit of feedback is that the original design for the industrial park was done based on all of the lots being maxed out at 70% impervious surface. The current proposal, I believe, is around 45% or so. So realistically, the systems that are in place were expected to receive a significant amount more of runoff because they were designed for much higher impervious surface much higher impervious surface percentages. So what's proposed is actually a good thing in that it's way lower. So again, I think at the end of the day, we can arrive at a place where the proposed modifications are acceptable, but as currently presented, I'm kind of struggling with it.
All right, so basically hearing that, there's some very simple things that Nate addressed in the beginning, and then there are some more complex issues. So it sounds like you have a presentation that you'd like to kind of answer some of those main pieces, and I think there's also a legal element as well.
Yeah, well, I think there are stormwater matters that probably don't need to be discussed here, that, and we agree with the engineer, there should be an engineer's meeting. But on a couple of those, it may be helpful to now, while we're fresh, talk through to make sure we're going in the right path. So I think the first one is on the MOU and the Act 167. The reason my understanding is the reason the engineer included the MOU in this latest submission was because the LVPC letter had already come out, which said the Act 167 was inapplicable, and the engineer's comment letter indicated, well, I don't know what they're talking about MOU wise, because the Act 167 would otherwise apply, but LVP seems to be accepting this. So he included the MOU. The only reason he included that was to show why the LVPC letter says it's not necessary. So I think we all agree, Brian used the word moot. I think it is a moot point, but I think what we're gonna end up with is it would comply in any event, but you're still gonna have a letter from the LVPC that has an appendix that says this is not subject to review. So if we all can agree it's okay, because we would have met it anyway, and we don't even have to debate whether that review is necessary, because the review would have come out as saying we met it anyway. So on that one, but that was the underlying reason why, and I get why it was a bit confusing, but that was trying to answer the question of where is that MOU? So they included it to explain the LVPC letter, but not to make any assertion as to anything but for why the LVP said that in this letter. If that makes sense, Brian.
Kind of. I guess you know, the LVPC has been around longer than me, and I certainly respect their statement about this whole thing. Like I said though, Eric, it's just kind of, it just seems it's unusual, and I would rather leave the interpretation of the MOU to you and to Mark Fisher as the legal experts, but there's conditions in that agreement that suggest that if the project wasn't applied for within 5 years, that when an application did come in, that the application was subject to current requirements. So that in and of itself is a bit of a contradiction as well. And like I said, I mean this, it may be a moot point if we work everything out and there's very little, if any, discharge actually getting into the storm sewer system in Shannick Road. then then it doesn't matter. It's just a matter of, I don't understand, how the LVPC could come to come to the understanding that they did. And I think they're similar to the Township Planning Commission. They're an advisory board. So I think we have the ability to say, yeah, we're not so sure we agree. Again, I think that it won't matter at the end of the day, but it just seemed kind of unusual. And like I said, Eric, we were kind of also wondering if there was some underlying assertion that the MOU conditions applied for the rest of the design as well. So I think if that can be established tonight,
No.
okay, that would be helpful.
Yeah, no, on that, we'll answer that question. I will say, I don't think we need to debate the fact that I disagree on the 5-year analysis because. And I don't think Mark and I will get to having to debate this because we're gonna find out it is a moot point, but. It talks about the 5 years in relation to 2 other sections. There's no 5-year language in this section, which to me would have suggested that. Where they wanted to say 5 years, they said 5 years, and where they didn't want 5 years, they didn't say that. But I agree, it's probably gonna be moot. We can address that at a later date if it becomes an issue. But on that first point, I think it's clear that we're not asserting that, the zoning ordinance from 72 applies or something.
No, if I could just interject that, everything that was just said from everyone boils down to the fact that. This was modeled as an entire development way back when. And certain assumptions were made on impervious coverage for each one of those lots and as a whole for the whole development. And then as long as whoever came in as a developer in the future on any one of those lots met that criteria, LVPC and everybody was like, okay, this was already modeled as a whole. It's just this component now meets up with this. Engineer McAdam, wanted an analysis of the whole site, including all the lots. We've done that. And proven that all works, and we've analyzed it a few different ways, but the bottom line is. It is a moot point. We included the MOU to back up why the LVPC said that, because I know there was questions about that. But at the end of the day, we are holding back our water, we are doing all that stuff, but it's important to remember that we're basing that on the pre-development condition of the entire park, not just this lot, because all of that was analyzed together, and that's why LVPC wrote that, and that's why they went back to the MOU. But we're happy to take out the MOU references in our stormwater narrative and just show that, hey, look, it meets it. As long as Mr. Schock said, as long as no one's looking for an updated letter from LVPC, because I don't think we're gonna get that.
So I think that's I think we've gone far enough on that one. We'll see how it unfolds, but I think that'll work out. The second one was the waiver for which the engineer had some concern. You're actually going to withdraw that waiver. Can you explain why?
Yes, so there's, different ways to analyze this, as we had obviously submitted. The waiver that we asked for from, section C1, or C1. We're no longer asking for that, and we will demonstrate, to the township engineer, why we believe that we don't need that. And we are trying to hold everything back as much as we can. Because, all the other lots are releasing their stormwater, so we're trying to spread it out as much as we can. But we'll get it within the time allocated for the requirements. And we have, so in removing that, we've also modified our waiver request for the street trees based on Nate Jones's input as far as what the township would like to see on the 3 roads, Industrial Parkway, Albertus, and Schanig. And just for everyone's benefit, Industrial Parkway, that we would ask for a waiver of providing the 6 trees instead of the required 9 trees. Albertus Road would be just the location of the 13 street trees based on utility conflicts and pathway conflicts. And Schanig Road, that we just have the existing 9 street trees, and that we would not seek to plant 2 more.
Yep.
So that's all in, response to Nate Jones's, letter.
And then, I think of Mr. Jones's list, maybe the other one to talk about is the life safety questions he had. So, because I think maybe the planning commission may want to weigh in when you explain where exactly on the plan he's talking and what you think should be done.
Yes, absolutely. So we're looking at the plan here. North is approximately straight up. So two things that Mr. Jones talked about. One was the crosswalk situation down at the intersection. So in the lower right-hand corner, that's the intersection of Shannick Road and Albertus. The only two corners of that intersection that have ADA ramps and pathways and sidewalks currently are the two northern ones, the one on our parcel and the one across the street across Shannon. So we will be adding to the plan painted crosswalk there to comply with the requests of Mr. Jones. The other, the life safety plan, I believe the concern is that a tractor trailer, all the truck traffic is on the west side or the left side of the building as we're looking at it. And the concern is that a truck or, truck with trailer would come in there and just park on the driveway for the heck of it, for whatever reason. And if that was the case, and they, left it there, they sat there and there was a fire or some sort of life safety situation, fire truck, would not be able to get that. So the request was to put in some signage of no parking, and also some sort of pavement markings. I think signage is fairly straightforward of, no parking on the driveway. But I wanted to just bring up to the planning commission for discussion what everyone would want to see, because I don't think cross hatching the entire driveway. I just don't see that as being productive. That might just be extraneous busyness that people are going to see and ignore. Are we looking at hatching, the inbound side or no hatching?
I thought I heard that tonight the painting, no parking on the curb, or maybe using the yellow or some normal indicator that would indicate to a driver that parking along that curb line is prohibited, would be satisfactory. Is that?
Nate, do you want to jump in on that? You had given the comment, and I thought it was crosshatch, but maybe it's not.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So we have the life safety plan up right now for everybody. And as you can see, the inbound lane and the black line at the westerly edge of the site, that's where the ladder truck would be servicing the site. So in the event that in the driveway area, or in the event that over by where the docks bay doors are, someone were to park along that curb, you're basically obstructing access to the site. So I agree with Mr. Fornwalt in terms of signage at the driveway is likely adequate. I think when we get into the body of the site where you do have the dock doors and we do have the dumpster, that whole area where someone could pull in temporarily, if they're, doing a delivery and they're early, or they're just, parking overnight or something along those lines. I mean, again, this is a private property, so it's up to the applicant to, manage and police. But as far as getting the ladder truck in there in a worst case scenario, we need to ensure that along that westerly curb line, be it painted yellow, be there no parking up along the curb, printed out clearly in paint. It just needs to be abundantly clear to anybody who might not be familiar with the site, making a delivery or doing a pickup, that they cannot be parking there. Otherwise, that truck is not going to be able to circumvent the site, as this life safety plan shows. So I would offer it up to the planning commission to see what their thoughts are. I do know that, from the fire perspective, both signs and painting were discussed and suggested, just to make it abundantly clear, because this is the only way the site can get served in the event of an emergency, and that truck, it needs to be able to get in. So.
Anyone have any comments on that? I mean, I think what Nate is suggesting makes a lot of sense, but it doesn't sound like that's what you interpreted it as the first time, or was it?
I think the first time we interpreted it as hatching across the entire driveway.
Yeah.
But if it's painting the curb, putting up signage along the curb, that's perfectly acceptable.
What other items, there were a number of waivers that have changed here, so just kind of tell us where you're at. Yeah.
Okay, so we think we're okay with painting the curb and
Agree versus painting the entire.
Yeah, I would concern.
okay, so. I think that's good. I also wanted to just talk, just real briefly, I think, I got from the letter that there were some concerns over. The abandonment of the existing spray system, but to keep that simple. We're building a new spray system that not only handles the volume needed for this development, but also for the past requirement of that roadway widening, so that's really a non-issue, I just wanted to explain that real briefly. There was, some comments on the landscaping, some of the trees being maybe a little bit too high and they're tall in their maturity. And interfering with a ladder truck, that we just talked about, so that's, we'll go back and review that with, arborists and whatnot. To make sure that that's addressed. And the other thing I wanted to just talk about again, there's 3 storm basins. There's the one that we're, completely redoing, the long skinny one along Shannick, to handle all of our impervious, but the other 2 have been functioning, properly, and they're out along the, industrial parkway. There was a lot of, talk about naturalization and different things. We're trying our best not to disturb those basins. There's a large area that flows through there, downstream of there, so we're trying not to create additional area that would be disturbed, from an environmental standpoint, or erosion and sedimentation potential. So we would offer that we could add to the plans that we oversee, with some variety of, naturalized vegetation, as an oversee without really disturbing the basins that are already vegetated and have a liner in them. So I wanted to throw that out there, but that's what we, our response to that.
Can either the engineer or planner kind of go a little further into an opinion on not naturalizing either of the basins?
Well, I guess the only thing that I would note, is, it is in our zoning ordinance, that, stormwater management features shall be naturalized. Our adopted planning documents, the best practices that are utilized regionally and that we're trying to enact in the township, with some of our larger projects. And I know that last month we talked about this with the new sprouts and the larger basin that's proposed there. That is kind of the design methodology, and aesthetic and planning that we're trying to, universally incorporate in projects moving forward. I understand that these are pre-existing, where Mr. Formwalt notes overseeding. I mean, quite frankly, that's would be in line with what we'd be looking to see. So, if we can find an appropriate seed mix that's in line with, what we normally, utilize, and, I would invite them to ask Kim Flanders as well, because she's been a great resource for those discussions with each project, with the CKS team. I'm sure we can find something along those lines that would be appropriate. It doesn't take much to oversee 2 existing basins. So, from my perspective, it would be acceptable, and I wouldn't want to have them go and request zoning relief just because they're not overseeding. So that's appropriate. But I do defer to the township engineer on any design related matters and technical aspects that might impact it. So Brian, if you have anything else, please add.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Yeah, I will say, for the planning commission's benefit, we had conversations with Alan about not disturbing the existing 2 basins along Industrial Parkway. And I will stand by what I told him, which was, if the calculations all play out that everything can be left alone, so to speak, then I'd be good with that. and I still mean that, and I am okay with it. Many, you know, as I mentioned earlier, they provided a lot of different calculations and a couple of different analyses of the systems. And I do think we can arrive at a point where I'm comfortable with what's going to be done. And I think in regard to the two existing basins, it's kind of technically one because it's got that pipe between them. That it's called an equalization pipe. The two facilities act as one basin, but they are currently still in sediment basin mode, so that the permanent outlet structure configurations have to be addressed. And I hope I'm not misstating this, but I believe that is what the plans show, that they will be dressing up the outlet structures, take out the sediment risers, take out any baffles, whatever, and put the outlet structures in that basin, those two components, install that per the previously approved design. And I am fine with that in concept. I think that the other component to this that Alan has provided documentation on is we were concerned that the plans initially showed that each of the three basins would get an impervious liner, and yet we weren't sure if that contradicted the idea of not disturbing those two basins. And so Alan and his team actually went out and they did testing in each of the basins along Industrial Parkway, and they have confirmed that when those basins were built, the clay liner was in fact installed. So to me, as long as they don't need to increase the volume in either of those facilities, they can stay as is. I'm happy to hear that they're willing to provide some naturalized basin type seed mixes. I guess the only thing that I have concerns about in that regard is I would rather have Nate and Kim Flanders, our landscape architect, discuss this with the design team. As far as naturalization, you typically want plantings that have deeper root systems. And I guess where my concern lies is we know now that the clay liner is in both of those basins. Will the naturalized plantings that we typically prefer with a deeper root system, will they be able to thrive in the basins that have a liner which kind of could preclude the roots from going down the way we would like them to? So I appreciate the applicant's willingness to apply appropriate seeding in the basins. But I think in light of the clay liners already being installed, I think it's something we may need to kick around a little bit and make sure that what we're requiring is in fact something that's going to both be compliant with the ordinances, but also will be able to thrive. Because I know that Lower Macungie and I know that CKS, we don't like to demand something that we know isn't going to work. And that applies to plantings. We don't want to jam too many in if they're going to be too close together and can't really grow properly. But similarly with this condition, there is a liner. So if the root systems can't really get down the way they're supposed to, or the way they would naturally, maybe we have to come up with something different. I just kind of want to leave the door open for that, in the event that the people that know more about the plantings than I do can actually agree, on what we should be doing. But I do agree with Nate that the ordinance does require naturalization. I'm hopeful that we can handle it just with seeding, if that helps.
All right, so for members of the planning commission, it sounds like the overseeding is acceptable. But there's a question of if it works in reality, and they have to be altered to make it work. Does anyone have an opinion on agreeing with that concept of allowing that to be the standard of naturalization and not disturbing it, or would you like to see it be done as the ordinance says, which is naturalizing it, but it would mean taking it apart and basically rebuilding it to what it currently is to naturalize it?
say you leave it alone and work with Kim, you come up with a legitimate planning that works for what we have at the present location,
It sounds like the end result is the same.
right?
Am I correct in that, Brian, that end result, if this was done and it meets the standard as far as what the plants have to be in there, we get the same end result as if they were starting this new and naturalizing it as a new basin?
Yeah, and that's what I was getting at, Wes. I think we can arrive at that point. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver in case the root systems are deeper or try to get deeper than the clay liner. That's all. But like I said, I think we can work something out and have the basins naturalized, even if it's not exactly like some of the other recently constructed basins. I'm confident in Kim Flanders' knowledge and Nate's knowledge in making sure that we get the look, I'll say, that we're looking for and required by ordinance. It might just take a little bit, it might just be a little bit of a challenge to find the right plantings, that's all.
And if overseeding doesn't work, I mean, if the concept doesn't work, if it's then starting over, is that basically the only option?
No, I'd like to think that between Alan's office, our office, and Nate, we can come up with something to arrive at a solution that is going to be compliant, if not picture perfect. Because like I said, the only reason I mentioned anything in any detail with it is the clay liner's there, and in some of the basins that we've had recently that have liners, you know, you don't particularly plant stuff in there. Some of them wind up being ponds, so you're obviously not going to plant something in a pond. I'm just trying to be careful not to say yes, it's going to be fine in case we run into a bit of a hitch later on. That's all. But I am comfortable telling you guys that I think between our office and Alan and his staff and Nate, we can come up with something that's going to be acceptable.
Good. So it sounds like there's a solution there, without taking it completely apart.
Good, thank you.
I just was gonna add, because I think at one point you had, the question you said was about the waivers changing, the waiver request letter. So I think if you look, you've removed the waiver request that your engineer did not recommend. I think the balance match up with the ones that he did recommend. So I don't think there's any change, the letter changed, but it actually took off the offensive request and right, it matches up otherwise.
Yeah, and we modified the street trees to comply
With what they suggested,
Right.
they said suggested.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
so I think we're good on that from our perspective.
Yep. Are there any other items on that waiver request that? It's pretty muddy still, I think, in everyone's mind. I don't think any of us are totally clear because.
do you want me to pass out? I do.
No, I think it's just a matter of that, you know, we've talked about fairly technical pieces and just keeping it in line, I guess. So if there's anything else on that list.
Well, just for the benefit of everyone who might be new or, right? So the first one that we have on our waiver request is submission for preliminary final. The second one is the basin side slope for the existing basins. The street trees, which is what I talked about earlier, and substituting concrete pipe with O-rings that says in the ordinance to, since it's a karst area, to utilize the plastic HDPE pipe with gas-filled joints in lieu of the concrete pipe. So that's what's on our new waiver request letter.
And I think that is one piece we didn't mention anything on, either Nate or Brian, a comment on the concrete pipe with O-rings. What was that?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with O-ring, I don't have a problem with HDPE pipes. They typically are already, push on joints with rubber gaskets, just clarification in our comment. So it is a private site. We're generally okay with it, yeah.
Any questions from the planning commission? All right, so I think it started off muddy, maybe it's a little clearer. I don't know that I'm 100% clear on all things because there's still some engineering work to figure out stormwater management. I think that the simple things here are addressed though. Mr. Solicitor, any comment, direction, suggestions?
It sounds like the
Idea?
engineers need to clean up the plans and come back for a recommendation.
Or you could recommend it, you could recommend it subject to us meeting with the engineer to resolve the stormwater matters that are beyond this meeting, but.
Ask it.
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
good
when I
answer.
come to a meeting, I wanna go home with a success, so
Yeah,
I
I hear you.
always ask,
I hear you.
even though, even when it may seem to be a little bit of a pipe dream, but no, we would like that, but by the same token, I'm not gonna pound the table and, yeah, pardon me. Yeah, I mean, if you make a recommendation on the waivers, that would make it a successful night.
We don't generally recommend the waivers separate from the rest of the plan. I think the feedback from the commission is that you're gonna get the
We're gonna get
waivers
them.
now that the dewatering is being resolved by the engineers, so I think you're good there. We always do that together with the
You can make an exception to make us feel. But it's okay.
Westlake,
I knew this.
Westlake's precedent.
Exactly, exactly. That's why I was like, I'm gonna defer because my answer is simple.
Yeah.
It should all be together.
Yes.
Because
And I like the
that's
Buck
how we do
tradition
it.
wherever I can,
Yeah.
but,
Yes.
So I think progress was made obviously tonight, so
Yeah.
clean up the plans in Brian's office and then.
Alan will be at your office at 8 a.m. tomorrow.
Well, Brian's in North Carolina, so he won't be there, so.
If
One above in the township today, so.
if Alan feels like driving down to Durham, North Carolina, it's pretty down here, but I'm not sure we're gonna make much progress this week.
I actually, when I saw them up there, I made the statement, I told Alan, I said, they're just over at the township, building, but it's really cold.
Right, yeah.
Walk across.
So Brian, you're out this week, we can set up a time next week?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I will be back at the office this coming Monday.
Okay, I'll send an email then to coordinate a time.
Yep, that's fine. I'll be periodically checking emails this week. I can look at my calendar and get back to you. Yep.
So we made progress, just not all progress. So next meeting will be quick. But
Thank you.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, good seeing you.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Appreciate it. All right, we mentioned that the Woodmere item has been tabled, and then the Upper Milford, Upper Macungie Township ordinance review. Vince, do you want to start?
I will let Nate, but I just wouldn't mind just put on record that's tabled by the applicants.
Of course, yeah, so item number 2 that was on the agenda, the Woodmere estate was tabled by the applicant. Yes, thanks, I appreciate reminding me back clarification.
Then third on the nature of
I'm good.
the.
Nate, do you want to bring us up to speed on the ordinance review and just kind of explain the process for anyone that hasn't had a neighboring township present an ordinance and kind of why we do it, and then any comments that you want to add to it?
Absolutely. So you really kind of laid it out there for us, and that's kind of perfect. It's very similar to what we've done with our administrative zoning changes that we were working on over the summer. We work very hard to be good neighbors and share that with our budding communities. Upper Macungie Township has submitted to us their proposed data center ordinance. I should go on the record as noting that, like every other municipality in the region, we are also currently working on language that will address that use for Lower Macungie Township. They in Upper Macungie are at the point where they're going to get ready to adopt the proposed language that's been included in the packet, and they've submitted to the Planning Commission looking for any potential comments that the Planning Commission may have about this use. The use in general is obviously considered to be one of the most up and coming uses. It's garnered a lot of attention, both in the news and the press, but also within our professional circles and getting ready for it when it comes in. As we all know, under the MPC, we need to permit and allow for every use that could be considered and figure out where it needs to go in the township and how to appropriately regulate it. So that's currently what Upper Macungie is doing as we speak. Because we are an abutting community and because there are zones in Upper Macungie Township that could potentially have this use, they have submitted the language to us for review and consideration, because it could very possibly be that there's land immediately abutting Lower Macungie where data centers could go in the near or long-term future. So after reviewing the language, I would, say hats off to our partners over there in Upper Macungie, because a lot of the things that we are currently looking at, they address in contemplation for their ordinance as well, such as buffers, which is obviously with shipping and logistics and warehousing always been something that we've tried to also be on the forefront for. Noise considerations and the impact that noise would have from these facilities. And then also water usage, which for us and for me in particular, as we're kind of poring over documentation and research on this use, is something that we're looking at as well. Either a will serve letter from the county authority, or in the event that they utilize a private water source such as a well, ensuring that is studied and taken care of well in advance during the application process to ensure that there aren't any negative impacts from that usage. Power supply as part of the ordinance is also considered. They do ask for information and justification and planning for that. And then last but not least, like with anything, but in particular for a use like this, emergency planning. So those are the main prongs that they've addressed in Upper Macungie as part of this ordinance that I'm sure you may have read. Again, we feel, or in my review, they're hitting a lot of very important points. So hats off. But they are inviting us to provide comment. And if the Planning Commission provides that comment, we'll take it here and we will address it and then send it off to their board for consideration, just as we've received some letters from our neighboring communities and our Southwest Comp Plan planning partners on our administrative zoning changes, where we intend to have the hearing in the near future on that as well. So that's everything in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about their ordinance, or if you want to offer comment, I can start taking notes and we can draft up a letter that'll go over to their board.
It is an interesting topic, certainly has generated a ton of interest kind of in the sphere of the internet. But anyone have any specific comments on how they relate to Upper Macungie, or how that may adversely or positively affect township that we should pass on?
What are the districts, GI and RT?
Yeah, so the districts, I'm going to go over those right now, sir. The districts where they're looking to do it, I don't have their zoning map, but it is the rural technology area, which I do believe that they have out on the western end of Upper Macungie Township as one of them. And then their other zoning district is in their technology industrial use zone, the general and technology zone, general industrial, which I do believe is where they have a good number of their current larger and intense uses.
The one thing that I have a question about is the comment that says the data center and data equipment shall be set back 200 feet from the boundary of a residential zoning district or the lot line of any property containing a sensitive receptor. So we know sensitive receptors could be residential uses, schools, daycare centers, etc. 200 feet from a setback to me does not seem enough. From research around data centers, the noise, the drone, the hum, 200 feet seems that's not enough. Reports show that in some cases, 3,000 feet, given the noise, the hum, that can be disruptive in residential areas. And I think of these sensitive receptors. I'm just curious, again, to have more of an understanding of how they came to that 200 feet boundary and your thoughts on that, from what you know about the research that has been coming from other neighborhoods. And
Right. Well, thank you for offering that, Ozias. For one of the items that we generally address with our more intense uses, especially with shipping and logistics and warehousing that we have worked very hard on, is the use of bermed and vegetated buffering. There is proof that utilization of vegetation not only buffers light and view of what's going on, but also the sound. So that's actually something that we've, at least in Lower Macungie, and also urged our friends in Upper Macungie, because if you drive along Hamilton Boulevard, you can see large bermed vegetative buffers there as well for some of their more intense warehousing uses, right along Hamilton Boulevard, have utilized in the past. So when you're developing in Lower Macungie Township and there is a use that is at a zone boundary, like in our commercial zone up against residential, we require that bermed vegetative buffer. That provides light buffering, it provides sound buffering, and then obviously view buffering for the sensitive receptors, which are generally residential uses. Our ordinances also generally call out schools, daycares, places of worship, life care centers is also being separate and sensitive receptors, as they're calling them in their ordinance, with requirements of extra space. 200 feet, it all depends on your point of view as far as space goes. In some instances, there are other municipalities that have incredibly large buffer requirements. It just depends on the space and where you're looking to do everything. So I think 200 feet, if done correctly with the appropriate buffering and shielding for those residential uses, could work. But if you're looking to be conservative, especially given the sound and the noise that this particular use generates, you could say that you would recommend more. I would just point out for a fact that, again, our shipping, logistics, and warehouse uses, with the backing up and the utilization of tractor trailers and whatnot, we currently utilize both space and that buffering to ensure it. So, and I do know that Upper Macungie does have the same type of language we have. So I would imagine that this type of use would be subject to including that berm buffering as well, depending on where it's located.
Back on that again, 200 feet is 6 school buses, and the data centers are known for their humming, the droning sound. So if someone is putting a data center 6 school buses away from your house, I don't care what kind of vegetation and sounding you're putting, it's not going to sound it out. So again, let's be mindful of the fact that this can be very disruptive and have adverse effects on people's psychological, physiological, and emotional health. So again, I push back on 200 feet and the types of categories of things that fall into the sensitive receptor. I push back on that. I think that more thought should be considered. If a data center is 200 feet from my house, 6 school buses, you're going to hear this constant humming and sound that could.
Well, again, actually, Ozias, I really appreciate that, because that's going to help me prepare documentation for you all in your consideration as we move forward, as we basically have to and plan to address this use as well. What are your thoughts as an appropriate distance then? Because I'd like to invite the Planning Commission to provide your thoughts on that, because that's going to help us craft something that we're going to present to you. And I'd like to do something for Lower Macungie that you're comfortable with. And then again, also, if that's what you're comfortable with, then we can prepare documentation in the form of a letter and just suggest that as well as part of our review when we send potential comments over to our friends in Upper Macungie as well. What are your thoughts?
I love doing research on this. Tons of evidence-based research out of MIT and other organizations that have more detail, that from ways to show what is the right distance. But 200 feet is not what's adequate based upon what I've read. But I'm happy to go back. As a researcher, I love data and research to provide you with more citations and information that you can use to bolster and support your recommendations. So I don't want to just give you something else. I want to give you some credible documentation that you can cite as evidence to support this fact that I'm making, that 200 feet is not enough.
And Vince was kind enough to put up their zoning map so we can see exactly where the rural technology and the general industrial zones are in Upper Macungie and get an idea of the abutting areas that would be, next to this potential use.
The GI and the R3 and R2 are right next to each other, so I know this is their township, but that they're never gonna get that 200, you know, what I mean, like, I think that this, based on what you're saying about the noise and all that stuff, would be very pestersome, you know, I mean, it would abut right to neighborhoods, I mean, that's some higher density there. I think that having, as I asked, whatever information you can find for us, I think would be very helpful in setting a standard, because I agree, 200 feet is not a lot. I mean, I think our highway is 100 feet,
Right.
like that's our buffer zone, which is up from like previously like 20 or 25, a very small distance, so.
And the property values will go down.
Yes, exactly, yeah, but come on now. Nate, and maybe we haven't gotten that far.
I'm just being.
Have we, I know our current zoning ordinance does have some definition in it, and it does highlight areas, the areas on the zoning map that could have it, which is a little different than this, in that they're a little bit, naturally, they're a little bit more removed from residential areas. That's still the case, right? That when we're looking at the Lower Macungie map, ours are natural.
Yeah, so we contemplated this use back in 2018 with the general zoning rewrite. And we have kind of seen it at the time. We did see it kind of on the horizon. As the technology and the use has actually started to evolve and make its presence known, there are aspects of it that you wouldn't have thought of, that many years ago, coming up on almost 10 years ago. So what we're looking to do is bolster the ordinance moving forward to make sure that we're complying with the law, but also that we're taking the advice and recommendation of the regional planning agency, our state partners, what other municipalities are doing. And as I always note to everybody when we're writing our ordinance, also looking at our specific local Lower Macungie issues and how we can regulate the use in a way that ensures that we're permitting it, but also ensuring the high quality of life and taking care of our residents and our sensitive receptors, as their language calls it as well. So I would say, yeah, it's definitely already something that we're aware of. It's something that's on the books. And I would say, stay tuned, because I would expect in the near future, I would be requesting that we have the same discussion for us that we're having for Upper Macungie this evening. And, I've made a note here, if we put together any documentation, our recommendation of more space in between the use from the sensitive receptors so far.
And also, it's important to think about their means of water waste disposal. So we know that these data centers tend to bring about higher use of water consumption. So you indicate they're using non-public sources of water consumption. But I'm concerned about their disposal of potentially toxic chemicals and how they're not going to be compromising local water. Similarly, research has indicated that the power supplies, so page 6 should indicate the data centers are going to connect to the electric grid. Data centers have been known to increase the cost of electricity consumption. Take more of the consumption of electricity from residents. So we will want to make sure that they're doing an assessment to an assessment identifying any detrimental impacts on electric rates or availability for other uses. That assessment needs critical, right? We want to make sure that this assessment is not going to be detrimental to the surrounding neighborhoods and residents. So similarly, 2 assessments that are pending are understanding water disposal and power supply, electric grid impacts of the data center. Any thoughts on that?
Are you asking me, Ozias, or the board in general, or?
General, based upon your thoughts about the detrimental impact on water disposal, electric grid, the pending assessments that are in the guidance.
Yep.
It says they're gonna do the due diligence, but there could be a potential detrimental impacts in those areas as well. Did you have?
So if you read a lot of the industry related language, either that's produced by planning organizations or the news media, those topics get brought up pretty regularly. One thing that we are looking at, and I've been looking at internally as we craft ours, is certainly water usage, disposal and usage. As everyone knows, we're very proud of our agricultural preservation efforts in Lower Macungie, and we have a number of farms that are in the township and ensuring that they have access to water to continue their agricultural operations, in addition to all of our residents who are on individual wells or are part of the public system, is of the utmost importance. So the Upper Macungie language does require study and feasibility for water usage. That's something that we continue to look at. On the power supply end of things, I think that's something we would want to do a little bit more reading on. We do know that they are heavy power supply users, and backup generation is incredibly important for them. So any site looks like it would have that. But with respect to the actual rates and whatnot, I think we'd want to do some more research on that, and obviously maybe even reach out to some of our partners at the local energy providers to see what their thoughts are on the use as we get moving. I think that's a great question. And I think as we internally have the discussion and we start to have it with the planning commission, it might be something that we want to look at. I do think that the language that our partners in Upper Macungie have put together certainly does call for some level of study on a number of issues that you've brought up, though.
I want to know your thoughts, Nate, on, because I'm not as familiar with 1,000 feet of the proposed wells, 1,000 feet from all water surfaces. Should be 1,000 feet from property boundaries. 100,000 gallons per day with water withdrawal. Are these normal? Doable?
I've seen a number of different ones, to tell you the truth, and it depends on where you're at in my review, because I've been looking at some users who have been looking at putting these uses down south, and what the local regulations are for there. Obviously in Pennsylvania, we have template language that's been offered up, and seeing what some of our partners elsewhere in the state have been doing, especially in the capital region. It looks mid-Atlantic states have been, all formulating their own language. So it's kind of a patchwork nationwide right now, to tell you the truth.
And who oversees to ensure that these rules or guidances are being followed or adhered to in typical cases like this? So how do we know that they're sticking to 100,000 gallons per day, or that they're adhering to proper water disposal? A lot of companies sometimes don't follow the rules.
Right. I can't, we have our local ordinances and we're responsible for enforcing our local ordinances. So if you write it into the zoning, as we intend to do, and as they're doing, it would fall on us at the local level, and specifically the zoning officer for the community, to ensure compliance. But beyond that, if there are industry levels or other licensures that they have to receive as part of the use, for all we know, it could be county or state requirements that they have to meet, and there could be county, state, or even federal inspection. So I'm not 100% sure on, but I can tell you when it is written into the local ordinance, it does become our responsibility to ensure compliance with at least the local zoning aspect. And generally, when we receive complaints, that's when we go and we check things out. So.
Thank you.
So just to bring the conversation back, well, actually, I'll open it up more. It sounds like you've got a comment.
Well, continuing on the power situation. Okay, most data centers that use a lot of power require feeds from two grids. And also, but there's a big problem that the state keeps shutting down coal and gas-fired generation capacity. And so there really is a question of how much overall capacity can be generated, and it seems like we don't want to give data centers the blank check when it draws all the power away from, you know, having rollouts on hot days because the data center needs power and so your air conditioning doesn't. So is there any way to be able to provide any kind of caps or safeguards to protecting the overall infrastructure from these electricity and water guzzling behemoths?
So Nate, I don't know if you have an opinion or comment to.
I think that, you know, the only thing I can speak to with that is, you know, again, I am in the process of learning about this use the way many of you are, as well as, you know, my colleagues in other municipalities. It's something that's new, and I think everybody is trying to get as much information as they possibly can to answer these types of questions. I think when we start getting into those types of regulatory issues, Commissioner Robert, I would want to defer to the township solicitor or some other entity, because, you know, a lot of this could also eventually be part of legislation that, you know, is either forthcoming or, you know, regulatory matters that involve the PUC as opposed to local government. So I think those are a couple of items where we're still on the learning curve for this particular use. And, you know, hats off to the Commonwealth and to the LVPC for helping prime all of us on the local municipal level to get us this information. And again, that information has been provided in presentations and data packets and template language that have helped all of us kind of prepare for the use. I think when we start talking about energy caps and regulating energy usage, I think that's where we would want to, you know, at this point, I would say we want to do a little bit more digging in terms of research and, you know, see who has jurisdictional power over those types of items, and, you know, what we at the local level can do either in partnership with those entities or where, you know, we have to defer because it might not necessarily be our jurisdiction. So
let me roll all this back to kind of where it actually started, and that's to offer feedback, because everything that we've talked about here is super important to getting our ordinance, the Lower Country Township ordinance, in line with what we think is important. But and I think there's probably still more discussion in future meetings, but for the topic at hand, it looks like based on the zoning map that's up right now, none of the proposed, or they have conditional uses proposed, none of those zones immediately touch any boundary of the township, correct?
yeah, I mean, they're all internal to Upper Macungie. So
I think as far as if there's an immediate concern to the township, it doesn't look like that would be an option. And then as far as our direct feedback, I don't know if because of that, I don't know if there is a direct concern, but everything that they provided us with is quite educational as far as what ours should look like when we get there. Am I correct? So does anyone have any specific feedback that they would like to relay to Upper Macungie Township? No.
I have the 200 feet that Ozias brought up. You know, we could certainly include that and you know, offer consideration of a further setback. But that's the one note that I've made.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know if there's any action. Do we need an official recommendation?
Yeah, I would vote on it just to say that you want to send that comment to them. It is a comment. They can completely ignore whatever we say. Obviously, I think everybody gets that, but if it's a comment, unfortunately, but they're it's out of the goodness of their.
Yes.
So as long as a majority of you members want to send that comment to them, perfectly acceptable to do that, and then Nate would draft it up and.
So make a motion to make that. Zayas, you want to be the motion maker on this one, or who else to make the motion?
So make
Just
a
saying,
motion
2-1.
that we inquire about more understanding about the 200 feet. We think it's not enough.
Where is that in the ordinance?
Page 6. No, it's on page. Page 4. Setback.
It's right.
Oh, yeah, I see it, okay.
Do we want to ask it as a question, or do we want to just make it as a suggestion that it be increased?
Should we ask where it came from? Like where the
Sure,
order came
yeah.
from?
I mean, I guess it's twofold. Are they looking, or are they looking for discussion? Or are they just looking for suggestion with no obligation to reply? What is the?
Yeah, they're asking for some feedback if there's any comments on things in this ordinance that you guys think are unacceptable.
Yeah.
Or should be reviewed
Okay.
or reconsidered.
Yeah.
We can say reconsider it, review it, reconsider it. We suggested they review, reconsider the 200 feet from residential zoning being a little bit further than that.
Makes sense.
But we went to review and reconsider.
Should there be a paragraph about that?
I think I kind of fall back to Stephen Covey's principle, seeking to understand before seeking to be understood. So I think it's kind of giving the premise that they've done due diligence, but it doesn't seem sufficient based upon our knowledge of what this should be. So
So-
I think it's review and reconsider that 200 feet doesn't seem like it's enough.
So let's use that as our motion. You can clean that up and send it to.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, discussion, any additional discussion? And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
With 4 ayes.
All right, Nate and I can put something together and get it.
Cool, there are any other comments, questions? Okay, and then, Vince or Nate, any updates on any other projects that are out there that have either gone through the board to completion or on their way to the board, are coming back to us, anything? you wanna-
Yeah, I can speak to that real quick, Mr. Chairman. So next week, on the 21st, or the Thursday of next week, we're expecting to have a night at the Board of Commissioners that'll have a number of planning and land development related items that will be proceeding forward. We're going to be offering up to the board for their consideration the 1470 Brookside Road subdivision, the Route 100 Sprouts, and then the hearing for our administrative zoning changes that we spent a good chunk of the summer and early part of the fall working on together to move forward and be adopted. So all those items that, the Planning Commission spent a fair amount of time working on and offering your suggestions and feedback and preparation, all next week will be up for consideration by the board. So that's where things stand with those. And then in the background, we do have a number of those outstanding land development items that have been before you before, where we expect, we're going to get resubmissions moving forward, based off of your comments and staff review and letters and such.
Good. If there's anything else, other than an adjournment, before I say that, for any veterans, thank you for your service. Happy Veterans Day.
Happy Veterans Day.
Yes. And is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Everybody have a great night.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night, all. Take care.
Have a good night.